He's lying motionless on the ground. This is about 20 yards from where I'm standing on the sideline. What had been a loud crowd and excited crowd, it was complete silence. I could hear a helicopter. They're telling us he's got a 3% chance of movement. As I walked out there, the athletic trainers are already stepping into place, doing their thing. And of course, my thought is I just failed miserably.
Why?
So
Why
we
did you
get,
fail?
yeah, well, let him get hurt.
Paul Leon here. Quick moment of your time. I wanted to take the hat off to say thank you so much for being a listener of the show. If you would do me a personal favor, be the 1 to 3% that leave a review, comment, or share the show with someone you know who may value some free professional development content like this. It takes a lot of work to put an episode like this together, but I do it all free because I believe in the mission of stronger people management skills to lower conflict and improve rapport in the workplace. I also want to give you a free gift. When you sign up for our newsletter by visiting themanagersmike.com, you will get a free PDF called A Selling Script to Skyrocket Sales. Here's a promise. I will do everything in my power to ensure that every episode serves your professional development skills. Thank you so much. And now back to the show. Mike Durnin is a nationally recognized leadership expert, educator, and former championship winning coach with a distinguished career in higher education spanning coaching, teaching, and executive administration. As founder and president of Crucius Leadership LLC, he delivers high-impact keynotes grounded in powerful storytelling. Mike equips leaders to navigate uncertainty, build resilience, and lead with purpose in today's chaotic world. He also serves as a president of Chris Norton Foundation, which was featured in a documentary called 7 Yards, and he holds a doctorate of ministry degree. And I want to say, Mike, this is a pretty cool podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, Paul, I'm looking forward to it as well. And I always enjoy conversations with people who have an interest in sharing stories and leadership and just having fun and learning from each other.
Heck yeah, that's my philosophy. So let's get into some questions I had here as when I was studying your LinkedIn. And do you prefer Mike or Professor? I think you're okay with Mike, but I always like to ask.
I'm always good with just Mike. That is perfectly fine.
All right. Walk me through, like, top of mind, because you've helped a lot of people, Mike. What's a story from all your coaching experience that captures how you lead today? And I know you could pick a ton of
Yeah.
stories, but let's just think of one that comes to mind in this moment.
It's great that you asked that question, Paul, because I'm at that age where, I've been around for a while and there are a lot of stories, but one, and actually I've given this in a few talks, is when I was, and this was shortly after the Chris Norton story, and we can get into that later. I'd love to, but I had a young man who was one of these athletes at Luther College. And he was like 6'4", 230 pounds, looked like a Greek god and a very good athlete. However, some of the decisions and choices they were making off the field did not correspond to the standards and the expectations of the program. And even the school for that matter. And after a few inappropriate type decisions by this young man, I made it just the hard decision, so to speak, of basically telling him, you're no longer part of the team for the rest of the year. And about a year later, he came back, we worked our way through one more year before, and then I left Luther College. Well, a couple years later, I get this phone call message, and it says, hey, coach, give me a call as soon as possible. Now, my first thought was he was calling because he was sitting in jail somewhere and needed help. Well, I quickly picked up the phone, called him, and he goes, Coach, I just got to tell you a few things. And he goes, after I left Luther College, I went to Africa. and taught English for a year. And while I'm there, I finally figured out what you were trying to tell us, what you were teaching us back when I was making all the wrong decisions. He goes, I came back and I got my further degree so I could become a middle school counselor and help young people not make the same choices I was making along the way. And he goes, and besides that, he goes, I met this young lady and she never would have dated me when I was in college. She's way too classy for that, way too smart. And he goes, we have picked out 2 wedding dates, but before we make a decision, I want to make sure you and your wife can be there.
Oh, wow.
It was at that moment, and I've talked in a lot of talks, it's like, the impact you have sometimes, and sometimes you never see the impact on people you have touched. When I was working, when I'd let him go on a team and so forth, he's not getting it. He's not getting it. Well, he didn't get it back then, but he eventually did. And I think it just proves that we need to stay consistent and we need to keep going onward and forward because we don't know when that impact will hit certain people. And to me, that's a story I still have in my office here at home. I have a picture from that wedding day with me and one of his very, very close friends during that time and one of the other coaches. I'll never forget that wedding. I remember walking into that church. We were there a little bit early because of travel. And he saw me and my wife walk in, and here comes over. He stopped everything that was going on, all the pictures that were being taken, all those kind of fun things. Both my wife and I got this huge hug from him. It was almost like tears were running down my eyes at that point. It was amazing. So that's one of those wow stories for me.
You said that he called you a year later because he said, "Now I understand." Can you give me a preview of how you would coach your players during that time? Some key statements that they needed to be that uphold or
Yep.
upheld, so that way they could meet the standard of a better quality of life. Could you give me a preview into that, if that's fair?
I think it all begins, you kind of mentioned it in the intro, for a number of decades now. My personal philosophy, my why, if I'm Simon Sinek of why I do what I do, is to be one and know every day in every way, living life, creating a transformation of self and others to be better.
Hmm.
And when I teach that, and what I tell myself as well, I can be one and walking across a campus, walking through the store simply by, do I smile and greet others or do I turn my head and avoid? I turn my head and avoid, I'm 0 and 1. I smile and greet people, I'm 1 and 0. I walk down the
Mm,
street, I see an empty Coke can sitting on the ground. I walk by it, I'm 0 and 1. I pick it up, put it away, I'm 1 and 0. The teacher, professor has assigned a reading, a chapter to read. I get that done and I'm prepared going into class. I have an understanding. I could actually teach it myself. I'm 1 and 0. I've
mm,
blown it off for one reason or another, or maybe something's come up where I couldn't get it done, but I'm 0 and 1. And in our lives, none of us are perfect, but we want to collect as many 1 and O's versus 0 and 1s. Everything we did, everything we tried to teach those young people at that time, it was more than just the game of football. I felt like I was trying to help people get ready for the game of life. That's how we taught. That's how we coached. We taught the game of football. There's no doubt about it. And
yeah.
we'd look to be as successful as possible. But I truly believe, and I still believe to this day, there's a bigger cause than just the game of football.
When you say bigger cause, and thank you for that framework, the 1 and 0, 0 and 1. I'm making the assumption that that framework or way of thinking, did that come just from football? Did it come from other sports as well?
Sure. I started with the basis of, in football, we teach, okay, next play. Matter of fact, Alan Stein Jr. just wrote a great book called Next Play.
Next play.
And it's the next quarter, it's the next game, next man up. wherever the case may be. So that 1-0 framework has been part of athletics for forever.
Right.
But then through reflection and through conversations with lots of people, it's like, this really relates to everything else too.
Right.
There's a symmetry between 1-0 on a football field and 1-0 as you go grocery shopping, or 1-0 when you're having dinner with your family. And so I started thinking about that. Said, this is making more and more sense. Now, the whole statement I read earlier, that 1-0 every day in every way, living life, creating transformation in self and others to be better.
Yeah.
It was fueled by Pete Carroll many years ago, wrote a book called Win Forever. And in his book, he challenges the reader to create their own why statement in 25 words or less. And so I took that to heart, and I ended up spending 3 months coming up with that framework, that phrase, and it has never left my side going forward.
I love that. No, and I haven't heard it quite that way before. I know for me, if I were to take that framework and apply it to my own life, I would say what I want to be 1-0 in 2026 is more present with my wife and kids. I think in 2024, 2025, I was probably 0-1 in that. Like, because I've been so obsessed and career focused. I like that a lot. And I actually took some notes on the books you said, and that's one benefit of doing a podcast. I get to go back and be like, okay, all right, now I that's one benefit of it. Walk me through when you had mentioned earlier your handful of L's framework. Of the framework, for context for somebody who maybe has never heard that before, because I always think of the lowest common denominator, not in terms of intelligence, just being new to you as a professional.
Yeah.
Walk me through that, and then let's start there.
I'd love to walk through the handful of L's. And to be honest with you, talked about the least common denominator. See, I'm an old football coach. I played college football myself. I'm not real smart. I like to keep things simple, and I think coaches generationally have looked to keep things simple. And I started thinking about, in athletics, the great ones always come back to fundamentals. The great coaches always teach fundamentals. And what are fundamentals built upon? They're built upon, and they help strengthen a foundation. So I started thinking about, what is the foundation for leading ourselves, and if applicable, leading others? What are some key components that transcend through the decades of people researching leadership development, et cetera? And so I came up with 5, where I grouped them into 5 L's. And the first L is continue to learn. I have yet to meet a great leader who wasn't continually learning. You know, they can learn by reading books. You can listen to podcasts. You can do an AI search in today's world. That's fine in my book, but you keep searching as many ways as possible. And then you also engage in conversation, because I believe that is part of learning as well.
Right.
So there's your first L, continue to learn. Second L, continue to laugh. Now I had to come up with, and I kind of stretched the word laugh, because it is finding joy, but it's also taking time for rest and renewal and reflection, so that you continually refill your cup. And it's something that became very obvious. I mean, I'm what I call a recovering workaholic. Listening to what you just said about 24, 25, you probably had some of those workaholic, traits in you. It's like, I'm going to go, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to go. And for me, it's like, I started researching the people that really I consider at the upper echelon. And there was a factor of taking time to rest. Go ahead, take that vacation, walk away. You should be, if you've done things right, you should be able to walk away, and everything else keeps going. I wanted that to be part of my handful of L's, part of that foundation. The third L is listen. One of the aspects of listening, I know a lot of people say, listen to understand, not to respond. And I use a graphic a lot of times when I'm speaking. I'll put a PowerPoint. I'm not a big fan of PowerPoints, but I love PowerPoints. They're basically a picture of one word, type of
Yeah.
situation. But I'll put a picture up of two water sprouts coming down. One's hitting a brick and one's hitting the sponge. Well, the one hitting the brick, the water goes all over the place. The one hitting the sponge, what does the sponge do? It soaks it up. I
Mm.
believe that's how we need to listen. And we need to bring that forward in our lives. And it pertains to all the L's, but wanting to make sure that had its own place
Yeah.
because listening to me is the first step in communication. And if you talk to anybody who's done research on leadership development and you're known as experts, they're going to talk about the importance of communication.
Right.
And communication is a leadership skill. Well, the first part, the foundation of communication is listening.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you got three L's. You got to learn, laugh, and listen. The fourth L is live, continue to live. You
Mm.
need to be in the arena. If you're always thinking, I need to do more before I can jump in and do something, you'll never do it because there's always more to learn. There's always more to do. You need to be in the arena. No one ever succeeds being on the sideline. My
Yeah.
guess, Paul, is your very first podcast was probably not as good as all your recent ones.
I don't want to listen to it.
And the thing is, though, but you had to start somewhere. You had to
Yeah.
get into the arena to make this happen. One of the great quotes I love to share when I'm talking about living, you do it within that framework. I always do it as a close is Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena. It's not the critic who counts. That to me is essential for us. We got to be able to say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have the habits. I'm going to have the discipline. I have a conviction for doing. Doing is actually my word for 2026. I just need to keep doing. And then the fifth L is love. I use the word love to encompass a lot of different things, but it's basically and you talked about presence, it's that sacred presence that we
Mm.
provide for others. Chris Voss, in his book, Never Split the Difference, talked about unconditional positive regard.
Mm.
I'll talk many times about unconditional love. I believe they're working towards the same area. Chris Voss talked about,
Yeah.
he learned to be a better FBI hostage negotiator when he provided unconditional positive regard to terrorists and people who were threatening to kill people. But
Mm.
by doing that, he could actually flip the script. If it works there, it's going to work in a lot of other places too. So
Yeah.
those are your five L's. That is how I look at the foundation for leading ourselves and, if applicable, leading others. Now, there is a bonus L with this, and the bonus L is legacy. And it's
Mm.
not only the legacy you leave onto others, but more importantly, the legacy others, when you continue to do the five L's, when you continue to learn, laugh, listen, live, and love, when you do that, others leave a legacy within you. And
Mm.
that to me, I think is just as important as anything else. So there's your handful of outs. And when I continue every time I read a book, I just got done. I read Next Play, from Alan
Yeah.
Stein. I read one from Kristen Browning and Cameron Orr called Built to Lead.
Yeah.
I'm reading one right now which a lot of people have read, Unreasonable Hospitality. As I read those books, I look and see this fits into this L. This concept fits into that L. It still
Mm.
holds true. I can still look at that, and which for me gives me more power in terms of what I'm sharing. But more importantly, it also justifies, yeah, I'm on the right track and I still have more to learn.
When you think about the 5L framework and the bonus L being legacy, Mike, and you think about all the people you coach, what do you think is a common mistake that a lot of people do in trying to lead or be stronger across all your students and things you teach? What's a mistake you commonly see that you have the foresight now to be like, that's probably going to go where I think it's going to go?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I'm going to share things that I know I've made a mistake on more than anything
Sure.
else. One is when you don't have enough courage to be your authentic self. You try to be somebody else. I think that I have learned from my own failures of leading is like when I've said, no, this is me. This is my authentic self. This is what I believe in. These are my values. This is my purpose. This is my why. When I've done that, yeah, some people disagree, and that's fine. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be anybody else. And I believe when I watch other leaders not be themselves, as long as that is for the common good. Okay? I'm going to put a caveat in there. All
Yeah.
right. But you need to first and foremost, I think, be yourself. And then when you're not, bad things happen. The other aspect there is in everything we do, there's some technical sides to it. And what I'm going to share is because I really love all the premises of servant leadership, but there's still that technical side. There's things you need to get done. There are processes and procedures that need to be done. Well, that to me is leading and living within the mind. But
Mm.
then you also have empathy. You have the essential skills, kindness, care, and compassion for others. When I talked about love, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. But the beauty is finding the balance between the mind and the heart, because that is where love and wisdom reside. Don't think of yourself as leading from the mind. Don't think of yourself leading just from the heart. There's a balance there. And that's what you're working for. And that balance is going to be different for everybody. But you're looking for that balance between mind and heart because that's where love and wisdom truly reside.
Tell me about the time you went through, if you're comfortable sharing for context. When was that moment where you said, I'm not being my authentic self? Because I think sometimes we get into a state, or at least I'm guilty of this, Mike, where I don't really see it right away. Or I've been in
Yep.
situations where I can honestly say I'm guilty of letting it go on sometimes for years. Would
Yep.
you be comfortable speaking a little more for context around when you went through a moment where you were not your authentic self? Maybe what happened for you to kind of have that
Yep.
self-realization, which is a key skill, especially around the leadership topic, I feel.
Here's one. It was actually when I was back in Luther College. Is we were struggling the last couple of years I was there. We struggled some to win games on the field, and we were doing a lot of other great things. But what I was trying to, and I'm gonna go back to what I was talking about the mind
Sure.
and the heart. I got myself too much focus on only the heart part and forgot the mind part,
Mm,
and avoided making some decisions, making avoided taking the paths where I knew deep down that's where we should be going, but I didn't do it. And I
mm,
hesitated, and as I talked about continuing to live, I forgot to be in that arena. After a short time of doing that, the university said, Mike, we like to go in a different direction for a head football coach. And I don't blame them. I wasn't me at that point.
mm,
I mean, I can look back and say, I wish they would have given me a chance. I think we had some things started to really turn around, all those things. But they made the
right.
decision, and that was it. But it also, I know that that decision actually provided me some other opportunities in my life that never would have been realized without somebody saying, no, we're going a different direction. And it made
Mm,
me open up my eyes even more of the importance of being courageously authentic no matter what.
mm,
And let the chips, I mean, I still might have somebody saying no to me, and
right.
that's okay. But I fear if I can still be my authentic self, I'm perfectly fine with that.
If you could go back in time, but you couldn't tell yourself, Mike, it's you from the future, and you couldn't tell yourself anything about the future, what are some things you would say to your younger self going through that tough time of being laid off as a football coach? Because I've been laid off 5 times. And I think the first time I was laid off, it was very painful. The second time I was laid off, I was like, that stinks, but I've been through this before. Somewhere around the fifth time, I was kind of like, so I'm curious, what would you say to your younger self who's going through that, but you couldn't tell him who you are, you couldn't tell him you're from the future, and that would be some wise words of wisdom that he should take, but he probably won't because the pain's too real in that moment.
Yeah. It's a great question. And when I talk about in different presentations, I'll talk about some of the tools involved with being able to implement the handful of L's. And two of the tools is first one is stay calm. You need to stay calm. Great leaders are great leaders because they stay calm in crisis situations, in chaotic, moments. The second one is don't be afraid. You're going to need others. No one does this alone. So keep developing relationships because you're going to need others along the way.
Mm,
And that would be the two biggest things I would tell them. Besides saying, hey, keep working on continue to learn, laugh, listen, live, and
yeah.
love. But you need these tools. You need to be able to stay calm. Don't panic and make sure it is okay to lean into others, just as long as you continue to realize you're going to be at a point of somewhere along the line where others are going to need to lean into you as well. What I talk about is that sacred presence
Mm,
where you honor others, you allow others to work their beauty, their magic in your own life.
that's good wisdom. You mentioned the Chris Norton Foundation.
Yep.
For context, in case somebody doesn't know the Chris Norton Foundation, let's talk about that for maybe the person who's never heard of it. And let's talk about what impact that's had on your philosophy around leadership to where you are today.
I will try not to get as emotional as I do sometimes with the
It's okay.
story, but it
And I
is an
invite your
emotional.
feelings if you're
Yeah,
comfortable, just to be clear.
it is a very emotional story. So Chris was a young man. He was, for your audience sake, he was the All-American high school student athlete.
Mm,
He was a great student in the classroom, and we're talking A type student. And along with that, he also was a great football player, basketball player, track athlete. He had a great faith. He was the All-American kid that
mm,
every coach in America would want, be a part of their team. And now his athletic talent was more of a Division III level, but I could give the qualities of Chris to, I don't care what level. Signetti at Indiana would look at the qualities and said, if he had this other measurable, I'd take him in a heartbeat just
mm,
because of who he is. And so Chris comes to school. We were very fortunate. He decided to come to Luther College. Well, his very first year, this is 2010. And so Chris had arrived on campus in August, and it's October 16th of 2010. Chris had worked his way. He was a backup defensive back. He was playing special teams. We're in the third quarter, early third quarter. We had just scored, got some momentum going, and Chris is on the kickoff team. He's going down the field. He goes in to make a tackle, and he doesn't get up. He's lying motionless on the ground. And this is about 20 yards from where I'm standing on the sideline. What had been a loud crowd and excited crowd, it was complete silence. As I walked out there, the athletic trainers are already stepping into place, doing their thing. And I walk out there and he's got no movement. Now he is conscious, which was a good thing.
mm,
He's conscious. A few minutes, a couple minutes pass, and his parents come down from the stands. All right, his oldest sister comes down from the stands. Other medical personnel come up. After about half an hour, 45 minutes, they transport him to ER. We did go ahead and finish the game, but as we're finishing the game, in talking to the team, I could hear a helicopter.
mm,
Now, we're in Decorah, Iowa. There's only two reasons a helicopter's in the air. One, they're crop dusting a field. The other one is they're life flooding people from Decorah to Rochester, Minnesota, and Mayo Clinic. Well, I knew that time of day, that's Chris. I knew what was happening without even hearing from anybody. And so I come off the field, and the athletic director or athletic trainer comes to me and goes, "Mike, Chris is being life flight." I said, "Yeah, I could hear the helicopter." He goes, they're telling us he's got a 3% chance of moving below his neck." And, my heart's just dropping even more than what it already had been. And so I kind of quickly got some things together. My wife ran to the convenience store to grab essentials for Chris's family, knowing that she was smarter than I was in the moment. She remained very calm, and that they'd only come here to watch the game and drive home. So we jumped in the car and we drove up to Rochester. And I remember walking into the hospital and going down this hallway to where the waiting room is, where I know Chris's family is at. And I could see one figure standing in the hallway, and that was Chris's mom. The same mom who basically 7 months earlier, I said to her, like I would say an Eddie coach in America would say, "Well, when your son comes here, we're going to take care of him." And of course, my thought is I just failed miserably right there. And
Why?
so
Why
we
did you
get,
fail?
yeah, well, let him get hurt. And even though I know it's a part of the game, her son is now lying, waiting for surgery. She turned to me, though, as I got close, gave me a hug, and said, "Mike, they're saying a 3% chance at any movement below the neck, but we are going to believe in that 3%. That's the mindset of the Norton family. That's Chris's mindset, is having that belief to look past whatever current situations are there for a better world, a reason to be here. Since that time, Chris was just amazing. He went after rehab. He got a little bit of feeling back. He's defied the odds. Now, he still lives most of his life in a wheelchair. Yet he was able to, through his own conviction, his own perseverance, his grit, he walked with assistance across the stage 4 years later and got a diploma.
Wow.
A few years after he got the diploma, at the end of his wedding, him and Emily, his wife, and Emily actually was the one who helped him walk across the stage. They had got engaged the night before, and she's as much a saint as anybody. They walked 7 yards, hence the title of the movie, 7 yards down the aisle after their ceremony. Hand in hand, arm in arm. Now, Emily's kind of really lifting, but Chris had enough mobility to do that. But one of the most beautiful things, Paul, of the whole situation is Chris realized he was hurt in an NCAA game. So he actually has lifetime catastrophic insurance. So he needs something because of his disability, so forth. He's always got a case manager. He realized very early, most people don't have that, especially people with spinal cord injuries. You have a few months or even a few weeks to do some things, and they send you on your way. You're on your own. He realized he could do something. He wanted to do something. Hence, him and his father started the foundation in 2012. To date, and we raise money, basically, we have different rehab facilities that will basically write grants to us that we fulfill. And then we also sponsor every summer a wheelchair camp. So we'll bring in approximately 25 young people, ages maybe 6 or 7 through 18 or 19, who primarily have either spinal cord or neuromuscular challenges, so that they spend a lot of their life in a wheelchair, if not all of it. And we provide them a week-long camp, zip lining, horseback riding, all the experiences, but we provide it not only for them, but their families, because we know families are important in this type of situation. And it's all expenses paid. And so we have raised since 2012 well over, I think we're getting close to probably $2.5 to $3 million that we have
Oh, wow.
raised, and basically almost every dollar goes right back out the door for some reason. What it has done, that experience, and I wouldn't wish this on to anybody. Yet, if you're going to go through any type of tragic event, you want to do it with the Nortons, because
Mm,
never did they ever allow that event to become a tragedy. It was a tragic event, but never a tragedy. And they
wow.
have fueled so many individuals. People who watch that movie end up in tears. Chris has written 2 books, and one with his father and one with his wife, Emily. Is his message that he gives when he goes out and speaks is amazing. And it's basically how to stand up
Mm,
and keep going onward and forward. That's his message. Even though the only way he can stand up, the literal stand up, is with the assistance of somebody else. That has fueled me. And this happened before I was at Let Go of Luther. What I'm experiencing right now is nothing compared to Chris and his family.
mm.
I need to be able to go onward and forward and keep looking. And then the other aspect, I want to keep looking to serve others as best I can, because I watch how Chris and his family serve so many within their messaging and within the monies that the foundation gives out, et cetera. And I've just been blessed and honored to be a part of that foundation since the beginning.
I feel like that experience and lesson for me, I've struggled with the thought of you're familiar with the term conditional thinking, I'm sure. And I could there's a part of me, if I'm being truly sincere with you, not to be negative, that story was very powerful. I think it's worth more than any amount of money that I can think of right now at this moment. But I have this condition where like I think X should equal Y. And when I was hearing about the 3%, before you said we're going to believe in the 3%, I would have never thought that. I'm just being real. I mean, like, I personally, as someone who's still developing as a leader, I would have never thought to think that way, which is why it's a very powerful story. I'm curious, would you say that experience catapulted you to wanting to do your PhD that kind of led to that
Yeah.
post layoff and all those events? And then I also like to kind of reverse engineer why you chose to make your thesis around the Stations of the Cross.
Here's what happened
Yeah.
is there's a couple things that catapulted me in that direction. One is after I left Luther, I ended up in University of Dubuque, and I'm assistant head coach there. I'm teaching a little bit and working with students. And the president back in basically 2000 December 2017 said, "Mike, I want to meet with you." And of course, this is about a couple rungs up the ladder, so to speak, in hierarchy. And he brings me in his office and he says, "Mike, how'd you like to do us a favor?" And of course, when the president of the university says, "Do me a favor," it's kind of like, okay,
Listen.
what? Sure. What do you got? He goes, "I'm going to put you in charge of all student life. You're going to
Okay.
be on my cabinet," which of course that's like the C-suite level of higher education.
Yeah.
And he goes, "You're gonna be my guy in that area." And I looked at him. I said, "Jeff, you know my background's not in that. I'm a person who was a teacher. I was a coach. I'm coaching. I've done some athletic administration, a lot of different, not athletic director herself, but a lot of supplementary athletic administrative roles. I've never
Yeah.
done that." He goes, "I don't care. I know how you think. I know how you put things together. I know you believe in the mission of this university. I know how you treat people." Goes, "You're the person I want." And of course, I said yes. And one of the reasons I said yes was there was my 3%. I don't know what is beyond, but I'm going to take this on. I'm going to find some way. And as I did it, of course, the first 48 hours, like, were chaos. I had a racial incident on campus. I had a sexual
Mm.
assault on campus. There was a perfect storm. And of course, the president said, "Mike, remember now, you're not allowed to resign." from this position, no matter what's happening. But it was great. Then, as I talked about, I started saying, I'm going to do this is what we talked about earlier, being authentic,
Yeah.
living what your why is. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it my way. It might look a little different from anybody else would do in this position, but here's how I'm going to do it. And as people notice that, I actually, at the University of Dubuque, they have a great theological seminary. A couple people had been watching and listening to things that I was doing and saying. And they said, Mike, you should really think about getting your doctorate of ministry. I said, I said, I'm not an ordained minister.
Yeah.
And I knew enough about administration at that point. I've been around it and knew the guidelines for all the different areas in our university. And they said, we don't care. We want to try this anyways. And so after about 3 months of back and forth with them, and this is where the L's come in,
Yeah.
the aspect of continuing to learn. And I made the jump. So now check the date out. In February of 2020, I started my doctorate in ministry. Now I'm saying 2020 for a reason. At the very same time
Yeah.
we're starting, I'm part of a 3-person team leading the strategies and the vision for how we were going to take on COVID. So I have a plate full just with that. Besides everything else I was doing, I said, yeah, I'm going to do this. And 4 years later, I walked across the stage after I'd actually technically retired from higher ed with a doctorate in ministry. And I can say without a doubt, every book I read, which we were reading at least a dozen books a year for the cohort,
Yeah.
and then the whole dissertation helped me do a better job in my actual job, even though it wasn't ministry. It
Yeah.
was helping me lead people and helping me lead students, specifically. And how the dissertation came about was we're about halfway through the program. They started the conversation. What are you going to do for your dissertation? How are you going to put this together?
Yeah.
Well, my cohort, I'm the only one who's not ordained minister now. The cohort, everybody's coming up with these ideas related to what they're going to do for their churches, et cetera. And I'm going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I remember lying in bed one night and I'm thinking, okay, you love leadership. You've been studying leadership for years. You read books on that all the time. You try to see what other people have done in certain situations. And this is where I truly believe the Holy Spirit works within each of us in different ways. But as I'm lying there, for whatever reason, I started thinking about the Stations of the Cross, the traditional Stations of the Cross. Now, I was born and raised Roman Catholic, and though most people don't even Roman Catholics don't know anything about the Stations of the Cross.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about it, and then I thought back to, and this is kind of unique. There's a great cathedral in outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Holy Hill. They have this huge pathway from the church down to the parking lot, and it's the Stations of the Cross. It's an outdoor Stations of the Cross. Well, that pathway is where I proposed to my wife 45 years ago now. We'll be married for 45 this coming summer.
Oh, wow.
And
Congrats.
so, thank you. And so I'm thinking about this, and I started thinking about the different stations and saying, this leadership concept works with that station. That leadership concept works with that station. And I got up in the middle of the night and I wrote all 14 stations down and I started matching up leadership concepts to the various stations. I remember that morning that I ran into the cohort leader advisor for my doctorate, and I said, what do you think of this idea for a dissertation? Put this together, write a workbook. Yeah, you could facilitate a group of people, take them through this and do all the research on the stations, the leadership concepts, and put it all together and let that be the dissertation. And they said, go for it. So there was born the dissertation. And like the example is, the very first station is Jesus is condemned to death. But within the scripture passages related to that, they're amazed by how calmly he just stands there. Well, the first one that we already talked about, the tool of staying calm. There it is. All right. Second station, he takes up the cross. Well, we all take up crosses each and every day. Not to that extent, but we still have crosses we need to bear. There's setbacks and challenges we need to take on. That's a leadership concept right there, shown there. One, you talk about service. I'm going to go all the way and flip this, the station 8, where Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem and stops and talks with them and actually prays for them. Well, you look at any good leader during turbulent times and at all times, they take time for others. They give back. So each of the stations have a leadership concept, and I still do some retreats. Like I have one coming up in March where I'll do at the Spirituality Center here in La Crosse, and where I'll lead people through that. And it's basically how to lead yourself through the concepts I associate with each of the stations.
Is that thesis, is that available, I'm assuming, online? Because that was a
Yes,
heck
it
of
is.
a, I'm going to have to, and just for context, what a lot of people don't realize is that only 1% of the population have a PhD. And I've seen a lot of thesis. My wife has a PhD. I've just never seen one like that. So I just thought that was very powerful to speak through. Mike, coach people on how you'd like to be best connected online if people want to learn more about you. Let's speak to that for those who might want to get to know you more, whether it's through your website or other types of resources you
Yeah.
provide.
To me, I love LinkedIn for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons. I can connect to a lot of people. I learn from others on LinkedIn, and really and truly, that is the best way to reach out to me is via LinkedIn. I'm the only Mike Durnin that has the initials DMin at the end, which is Doctor of Ministry. And that is the best way. You can drop me a message, ask questions, etc. My email's a little bit more, my email's on my LinkedIn page, so you can get to me that way. And then my dissertation is how I came up with what I call the company, basically my LLC, is Via Crucis Leadership, because Via Crucis is Latin for way of the cross.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's
Okay. I didn't
the
know that.
tie-in.
Yeah. It's thought through. Yeah. I love that.
So that's the
Awesome.
best way to get a hold of me. I welcome any and all. And you reach out to me. When you do, I'll give you my cell number, the whole bit. My cell numbers in so many places now, it doesn't matter. So
Yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes, like that content. I always like to plug it in
yep.
audioly. What would you want to tell people just coming in into the concept of leadership?
And how I close, basically close every talk. And I'm
Yeah.
always going to leave this message with any and all. And it's basically, I can say it as words or I can say it as a prayer. But it's to keep our minds and our hearts and our souls open as we continue to learn, continue to laugh, continue to listen, continue to live, and continue to love. And when we do that, we are providing ourselves the opportunity to not only leave a legacy upon others, but more importantly, allow others to leave a legacy within us. And when we do that, great things happen.